poor girl cries at her sister's grave and screams, "She's still alive." The young billionaire, father of the deceased girl, notices she looks exactly like his daughter, and, together with the police, decides to exhume the coffin. The light rain dampened Callie's dark hair as she pulled the old coat tighter around her small body. She was only 5 but already knew the city streets well. Her large green eyes, curious and alert, observed everything carefully. She had learned early on that paying attention was important for survival. That night, as on so many others since her mother had died 3 months before, Callie was looking for a place to shelter. The grey sky was getting dark fast, and she clutched the only treasure she had against her chest, a creased photograph where her mother was smiling. "Are you hungry, kid?" asked a man selling hot dogs on the corner. Callie hesitated, but she nodded. She had learned that some people were kind even to a child living on the streets. "Here," he said, offering a hot dog wrapped in a napkin. "Make sure you don't get too soaked." "Thank you," she answered in a low voice, taking the food with her small hands. As she ate slowly to savor every bite, Callie kept walking along the main avenue. The stores were starting to close, and the bustle was subsiding. This was the time she liked best. Fewer people meant less danger. She stopped in front of an electronics store. The TVs in the display window were showing the evening news. Callie liked to watch. She felt it gave her a glimpse into the normal world, the one where children slept in beds and didn't worry about the cold. That's when the image on the screen made her choke. After weeks of intense searching, the body of little Sloane Mercer was buried today, the reporter said solemnly. The Oakville community is mourning the loss of the 5-year-old who was kidnapped a month ago from her own front yard. But it wasn't the sad news that froze Callie in place. It was the face of the girl who appeared on the screen. She dropped the rest of her hot dog on the ground. "She looks just like me," Callie whispered, placing her hand against the cold glass of the display window. The same face shape, the same green eyes, the same dark, straight hair falling onto her shoulders in the same way. It was like looking in a mirror. The only difference was the smile. The girl on TV was smiling in a color photograph, wearing a pretty dress, while Callie wore old clothes that were far too big for her. The reporter continued. The body was found in a wooded area near the city. Her adoptive parents, Evan and Laura Mercer, held the funeral today in a private ceremony. Callie couldn't look away. A man appeared on the screen, tall, shoulders slumped, eyes red from crying. He was holding a teddy bear. "Our daughter was pure light," the man said, his voice breaking. "Whoever did this destroyed our world." A chill ran through Callie's small body. It wasn't just the shock of seeing someone so much like her. It was something deeper, like an invisible string tugging at her heart. She placed her hand on her chest, confused by this new feeling. "I know her," she murmured to herself, not understanding why she said that. The newscast moved to another story, but Callie remained there, as though her feet were glued to the ground. The rain was falling harder now, but she hardly noticed. "Hey, kid, are you going to stand there all night?" the store's security guard yelled as he came out to lock the door. "Go on, get out of here." Callie slowly moved away, still staring at the TVs, which were now showing commercials. She walked aimlessly, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions. Where had she seen that girl before? How could they look so alike? She found shelter beneath the awning of a closed building. Huddled against the wall, she pulled from her pocket an old newspaper scrap she used for warmth on cold nights. But sleep wouldn't come. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the girl's face. Sloane. A pretty name. "Sloane," she repeated quietly, as if testing how it sounded. She closed her eyes and, for the first time since living on the streets, Callie dreamed. In the dream, she ran through a green field with another girl. They were laughing together, hand in hand. When the other girl turned her face, it was like looking into a mirror. She woke up at dawn, trembling. It wasn't just the cold, it was the certainty growing inside her. "She's not dead," she said to the darkness. "I can feel it." Callie had seen a lot on the streets. She'd learned to trust the signals her body gave her, when a place wasn't safe, when someone was lying, when a storm was coming. And now her body was shouting that there was something very wrong with that story. When the first ray of sunlight touched the buildings, Callie was already up. With a surprising resolve for a 5-year-old, she started walking. She needed to find out where the girl was buried. Passing a newsstand, she saw Sloane's picture on the front page. She stopped to read the big letters she could understand. Goodbye to Sloane. And underneath, in smaller letters, she spelled out with difficulty, Oakville Memorial Cemetery. Callie didn't know much about the city, but she'd heard of that cemetery. It was in the wealthy part of town, across the river. It would be a long walk. She pulled the old coat tight around her body and started walking. With each step, the strange feeling in her chest grew stronger, as though someone were calling out to her, without words. "I'm coming," Callie murmured, speaking to the wind. "I'm coming to find you." The sun had barely risen when Callie reached the gates of Oakville Memorial Cemetery. She'd walked across the entire city, asked for directions, and even snuck onto a bus when the driver wasn't looking. Her small feet ached inside her worn-out sneakers, but her desire to get there was stronger than her exhaustion. The cemetery was unlike anything Callie had ever seen. Enormous trees, neatly trimmed grass, colorful flowers on many graves. It looked more like a park than a place of sadness. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves and carried the sweet scent of the blossoms adorning the headstones. Callie stopped before the large iron gates. For a moment, she felt afraid. What if an adult asked why a 5-year-old was there alone? But the strange feeling in her chest, the one that started when she saw Sloane's face on TV, was stronger than her fear. "What are you doing here by yourself?" asked a man in uniform, appearing from behind a tree with a broom in his hand. "Where are your parents?" Callie looked at the ground, rehearsing the lie she had prepared while walking. "My mom is visiting a grave. She let me walk around a little." The groundskeeper frowned, looking around. "I don't see anyone nearby." "She's further over that way," Callie said, vaguely pointing to a distant part of the cemetery. The man didn't look fully convinced, but his expression softened upon noticing the girl's tattered clothes and how long it must have been since she'd had a proper bath. "Who are you looking for, little one?" Callie hesitated, then decided to risk the truth. "Sloane Mercer." The groundskeeper sighed, his shoulders sagging. "Oh, the little girl they buried yesterday. What a tragedy." He pointed to a more distant area. "She's over there, near that big oak tree. There should still be lots of flowers." "Did you know her?" "Yes," Callie lied, feeling a strange tightness in her throat. We were friends." The man nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry, kiddo. She was far too young." He hesitated, appearing uncomfortable. "Listen, you shouldn't be wandering around here alone. Go back to your mum soon, okay?" Callie thanked him with a nod and headed in the direction he indicated, aware of his gaze on her back for a few moments. When he finally returned to work, she breathed a sigh of relief and quickened her pace. The path wound among graves of all sizes. Some were simple, just a small plaque on the ground. Others were huge, with statues of angels and saints. Callie read a few names as she passed, wondering who these people had been when they were alive. In the distance, she spotted the place. Even without knowing exactly where it was, she would have found it. A pile of fresh flowers covered a small grave, making it stand out from the others. As she got closer, she noticed there were also toys, teddy bears, a doll, even a tiny plastic unicorn. On the white marble headstone, golden letters spelled out the name Sloane Mercer, our brightest star. Callie felt her legs tremble. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She looked around and, seeing she was alone, knelt before the headstone. "Hi," she whispered, feeling silly for talking to a stone. "I'm Callie." The cemetery was almost completely silent, except for some birds singing in the trees and the distant sound of the wind through the leaves. The girl traced her finger along the golden lettering, following the outline of the name. "Why do you look like me?" she asked quietly. "Why do I feel like I know you?" A dry leaf drifted onto the grave, carried by the wind. Callie picked it up, turning it in her fingers while she tried to understand the storm of feelings inside her. Without realizing it, tears began streaming down her dirty face. She didn't understand why she was crying for someone she had never met, but the pain was real, as if she had lost a part of herself. As if something important had been torn away from her without her knowledge. I saw you in my dreams, she continued softly, tears now falling freely. I thought I made you up. But you're real. You were real. The tears streamed unchecked down Callie's face. She sobbed, her small shoulders shaking with the effort. Her hands touched the fresh soil of the grave, fingers sinking into it. No, she murmured between sobs. You're not here. Something was growing inside her, a feeling so intense her small body could barely contain it. It was like someone was shouting inside her head, trying to be heard. Callie grabbed a handful of soil, feeling it slip through her fingers. Her tears fell onto her hands, turning the dirt into mud. She's still alive, she said quietly, her voice trembling from crying. Then, in a sudden impulse, she lifted her face to the sky and shouted, "She's still alive!" Her cry echoed through the cemetery, startling some birds into flight from the nearby trees. Callie knelt again, resting her forehead against the cold headstone. "She's still alive," she repeated, her voice now a hoarse whisper. "I can feel it." It was at that moment she realized she was no longer alone. She looked up and saw a tall man standing a few yards away, frozen at the sight of a little girl kneeling at his daughter's grave, her face wet with tears. Evan Mercer dropped the bouquet of white flowers he was carrying, his eyes wide with shock. The soft rustle of flowers hitting the grass made Callie turn fully around. They stared at each other in silence. Evan saw his daughter's ghost in another child. Callie saw the man from the television, the father of the girl who looked just like her. For long seconds, neither of them breathed. "Who are you?" Evan finally asked, his voice so rough it almost didn't come out. Callie took a step back, frightened. The survival instinct she'd learned on the streets told her to run, but something stronger kept her there. "I'm sorry, sir. Your face," Evan murmured, coming closer slowly as if afraid to scare away a wild animal. "How is this possible?" The girl thought of running. That was what she always did when adults seemed suspicious. But something held her in place, as though her feet were rooted to the ground. "Why did you say she's alive?" Evan asked, kneeling so he'd be at her eye level, still leaving a few steps between them. Callie bit her lip, undecided. Life on the streets taught her not to trust strangers. But something in this man's eyes, there was a grief so deep it looked endless, and a small glimmer of hope she had just awakened. "I can't explain," she finally said. "But I feel it in here." She tapped her own chest, right over her heart. "Since I saw her on TV, I can't stop thinking about her. It's like she's calling me." Evan closed his eyes for a moment, his hands visibly trembling. When he opened them again, they were full of tears. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Callie." "Callie Bennett. Where are your parents?" said Callie. The girl stared at the ground, kicking a small pebble with the tip of her shoe. "My mom died. I don't have a dad." "I'm so sorry," Evan said, and he sounded sincere. "Who takes care of you?" Callie shrugged. "No one. I take care of myself." Evan tried to process what was happening. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. This girl could be Sloane's twin sister, and now she appeared alone, saying things that made no sense but sent chills down his spine. That lit a spark of hope he'd buried with a tiny coffin. "Wait here," he said finally, standing up. "I'm going to make a phone call." Evan stepped a few paces away but kept his eyes on the girl, as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Callie sat on the grass near the headstone, hugging her knees. Her stomach rumbled with hunger. She hadn't eaten since the day before, when a kindly baker gave her leftover bread at closing time, but she was used to ignoring that. "Dana, it's Evan," she heard him say on the phone. "I need you to come to the cemetery now. It's about Sloane, or rather, it's complicated. Just come, please." While they waited, Evan walked back to Callie. Hesitantly, he pulled a pack of cookies from his coat pocket. "Would you like one?" he offered, holding out the package. Callie hesitated, but hunger prevailed. She nodded and took a cookie, eating slowly to make it last. "Do you come here often?" Evan asked, trying to break the awkward silence. Callie shook her head. "It's my first time. I saw the news yesterday and I had to come. How did you get here?" Walking, I also took a bus for a bit. Evan looked at the girl's worn sneakers, imagining how far she must have walked. Dark stains of dirt clung to her small hands that held the cookie so carefully. You live on the streets? Callie shrugged. For now, since my mom died. You have no other relatives? No one else who can take care of you? No, it was just me and my mum. Evan looked like he wanted to ask more questions, but he was interrupted by the arrival of a car. It pulled up noisily to the cemetery entrance, and a woman with black hair tied in a ponytail climbed out in a hurry. Dana Whitaker wore jeans, boots, and a leather jacket. She didn't look like the kind of police officer Callie had imagined. Dana walked quickly among the graves, spotting Evan easily. He was the only person visible in that part of the cemetery. But when she got closer and saw the girl, she stopped short. "Oh my God," she murmured, looking from Callie to Evan and back to Callie. "This is Callie Bennett," Evan introduced, standing up. "I found her crying at Sloane's grave, shouting that she's still alive." Dana approached slowly, as though seeing a ghost. And in a way, she was. The resemblance was terrifying. "Hi, Callie. I'm Dana Whitaker." "Are you a cop?" Callie asked warily, noticing how Dana studied her. "I'm a private investigator now. I used to be with the police," Dana explained, kneeling in the grass to be at the girl's eye level. "Can I ask you some questions?" Callie shrugged, finishing the last bit of her cookie. "Sure." "How old are you, Callie?" Dana began. 5. Dana glanced at Evan, who nodded silently, the same age as Sloane. "And why do you think Sloane is alive?" Dana asked directly. Callie closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to listen to something very faint. When she opened them, a certainty shone in them that seemed odd in such a small child. "I've been dreaming of her, for weeks. I thought it was all in my head, but now I know she exists." "What do you see in these dreams?" Evan asked, leaning forward, his voice thick with emotion. "A girl who looks just like me," Callie answered simply. "Sometimes we're together, like we've known each other forever." Dana took a notepad from her bag and started writing. A stronger gust of wind blew, stirring the flowers on the grave. "And when did these dreams start?" Dana continued. "I'm not exactly sure," Callie said, thinking a bit and furrowing her brow. "Maybe a month ago. It was before my mum died." Evan raised his eyebrows. "A month ago is when Sloane disappeared." Dana wrote something down quickly, underlining the words. "Callie," Dana said slowly, "you said you feel Sloane is alive. Exactly what do you feel?" The girl placed her hand over her heart, as if trying to hold on to something precious inside. "It's like a pull in here, like someone calling me without using words." She looked straight at Evan. "I know it sounds crazy. I've met really crazy people on the streets. I'm not crazy. I just know she's not down in that hole." Dana and Evan exchanged a meaningful look. Dana stood up and pulled Evan aside, a few steps away from Callie. "This is impossible," Dana whispered. "The resemblance is—" "I know," Evan replied. "What do you think?" Dana bit her lip, pondering. "I can't explain it, but maybe we should exhume the body." Evan finished the thought. Dana nodded slowly. "I know it sounds crazy, but what if there was a mistake? The body was badly decomposed when it was found. Identification was done mainly by the clothing and the location, remember?" Evan looked at the flower-covered grave, then at Callie, who was waiting on the grass, watching a bird that had landed on a nearby headstone. "What do we tell the judge?" Evan asked. "That a homeless girl appeared saying she dreamed of my daughter?" "No," Dana answered firmly. "We'll say we found evidence that calls the body identification into question. It's vague, but it might work. I'll call Judge Thompson. He owes us a favor. Maybe I can get authorization for tomorrow morning." "And what about her?" Evan asked, nodding toward Callie. "I'll call social services," Dana said. "But given the circumstances, maybe they'll allow her to stay in your temporary custody." Evan hesitated. "Laura is at her sister's. Since the funeral, she hasn't been able to stay at home." "All the better. This would be too hard on her right now, especially if—" She let the sentence trail off. While the adults talked, Callie continued to sit by the headstone. The midday sun shone brightly now, warming her face. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she thought she heard a very faint voice calling her name. It wasn't a real sound, it was as if it came from inside her. "I know you're alive," she whispered to the wind. "I'll find you." Dana came back over, putting her phone in her pocket. "Callie, do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The girl shrugged. "I always find somewhere." "You'll stay at my house," Evan interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "At least for tonight." Callie gave him a wary look. "Why?" "Because you appeared for a reason," Evan replied, his voice trembling slightly, "and I need to find out what it is." Dana nodded. "I've already made a few calls. Tomorrow we're going to verify some things." "The body?" Callie asked bluntly. The adults looked surprised by her perceptiveness. "Yes," Dana confirmed. "We're going to check if it's really Sloane." "It's not," Callie stated firmly. "You'll see." Sitting beside his daughter's grave, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows among the headstones, Evan observed Callie's face, identical eyes, nose, lips, a little girl who appeared out of nowhere, like a sign, shouting what his father's heart had wanted to believe. "Why did you show up now?" he asked in a quiet voice. Callie looked at him with eyes that seemed much older than her 5 years. "Because she needs to be found." A heavy silence fell over the three as the sun began its descent. The headstone's shadows stretched over the green grass like fingers trying to reach for something. The cemetery was nearly empty now, with only the groundskeeper working in the distance, occasionally casting curious glances at the strange group gathered around the newest grave. Among flowers wilting under the heat and whispered promises to the wind, a truth waited to be uncovered. Tomorrow the earth would be removed, the coffin opened, and the first step in finding Sloane would be taken. Callie took one last look at the headstone before following Evan and Dana to the car. The golden letters gleamed in the late afternoon sun, but she knew the name inscribed there belonged to someone still breathing somewhere out there. "I'll find you soon," she promised softly. Morning arrived with a gray sky and a light drizzle falling over Oakville Memorial Cemetery. Despite the weather, the place was far from its usual silence. A small group had gathered around Sloane Mercer's grave, officers from the police department, cemetery workers, a medical examiner, and standing off to the side, Evan Mercer, Dana Whitaker, and Callie. Evan stood motionless, his face pale in contrast to his dark overcoat. His eyes didn't stray from the grave as workers removed the flower wreaths and prepared the equipment for exhumation. Dana stood next to him, occasionally whispering words of encouragement he barely seemed to register. Callie clung tightly to Evan's hand. She had spent the night at his house, sleeping in a guest room after a quiet dinner. Neither had slept well, Evan anxious about what was coming, and Callie, unaccustomed to sleeping in a real bed for the first time in months. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Detective Miller, approaching Evan. He was a middle-aged man with deep under-eye circles and a tired expression. "We can proceed without you being here." "I need to be here," Evan replied, his voice steadier than anyone would expect. "If there's any chance, I have to know." Miller nodded, casting a curious glance at Callie. Dana had explained the situation as best she could. New evidence, possible misidentification, no mention of dreams or unexplainable sensations. Still, the situation was unusual enough to raise eyebrows. "All right, we're set, sir," one of the workers announced. "Callie, you don't have to see this," Dana said kindly. "We can wait in the car." But the girl shook her head. "I want to stay." The machine started up, carefully removing the earth. Callie watched with an intensity that was strange for a 5-year-old. There was no fear in her eyes, only a silent certainty. It took nearly an hour to fully expose the coffin. Small, white, adorned with golden details, a coffin made for an angel, as the funeral home staff had called it. Evan swallowed hard as the workers prepared to remove the lid. "Mr. Mercer, last warning," said the medical examiner. "The body has been decomposing for almost a week. It won't be a pleasant sight." "I understand," Evan replied, holding his composure. The examiner signaled the assistants, who carefully undid the coffin's seals. An absolute silence fell over everyone present as the lid was lifted. The smell came first, the cloying, nauseating odor of death. Several of those present covered their noses with handkerchiefs or sleeves. Then everyone could see. Inside the coffin, dressed in a small white dress, lay the body of a little girl. Dark hair framed a face just beginning to distort from natural decay. Even so, it was evident this was a child of about 5 years old. Evan took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the body. The medical examiner and his assistants worked quickly, photographing, measuring, collecting samples. "Doctor," one of the assistants said, pointing at something on the body's neck. The medical examiner approached, examining closely. "Interesting. What is it?" Dana asked, stepping closer. "A birthmark," the examiner explained. "A small mark on the right side of the neck." Evan felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "Sloane doesn't have a birthmark on her neck," he said in a barely audible voice. "Are you sure?" Detective Miller asked. "Absolutely," Evan responded more firmly now. "I know every inch of my daughter. She does have a small birthmark, but it's behind her left ear, not on her neck." The examiner signaled an assistant Ruka, who handed him a folder. He opened it, checking some documents. "There's no mention of any neck birthmark in the preliminary autopsy report," he said. "But given the condition of the body when it was found..." He trailed off. "How long to confirm through DNA?" Dana asked. "With top priority, 2 or 3 days," the examiner replied. "We don't need to wait that long," Evan said. He moved closer to the coffin, looking fixedly at the child's small hands. "Sloane broke her right wrist about a year ago. She fell off her bike. The bone should show signs of a healed fracture." The examiner frowned in thought. He motioned to one of his assistants, who brought a small portable X-ray device. "We can check right now," he said. As they prepared the equipment, Callie remained silent, watching everything with her large green eyes. She seemed neither scared nor disturbed by the sight of the body, just confirmed in her certainty. The examiner positioned the device and took the scan, studying the digital image on his tablet. After several minutes of careful analysis, he looked up. "No sign of a prior fracture in either wrist," he announced. "Not even a healed microfissure." A heavy silence fell over the group. Callie was the one who broke it. "I told you," she said in a clear voice that carried in the damp morning air. "It's not her." Detective Miller looked at the girl, then at Evan. "Mr. Mercer, it means we have to find my daughter," Evan finished, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and newborn hope. "She might still be alive." The following days were a flurry of activity. Sloane Mercer's case was officially reopened, and the police launched a new round of investigations. The body found in the woods belonged to an unidentified girl, possibly another missing child who had never been reported. Evan barely slept, splitting his time between meetings with investigators and caring for Callie. Social services had agreed to grant him temporary custody, given the extraordinary circumstances and the lack of known relatives for the girl. Evan's home, once a monument to grief, had turned into a command center. The guest room now belonged to Callie, who was still adjusting to the idea of having a roof over her head. On a rainy night, a week after the exhumation, Evan found Callie sitting on the living room floor, flipping through a photo album. It was full of pictures of Sloane, her first birthday, days at the park, dressed up for Halloween. "She looks happy," Callie commented, noticing Evan in the doorway. "She is," Evan answered, sitting down beside the girl. "She is." The use of the present tense didn't escape Callie, who gave a small smile. "Do you want to tell me about yourself?" Evan asked gently. "About your mum." Callie was silent for a moment, turning another page in the album. "Her name was Rose," she said finally. "She was beautiful. She used to sing to me before bed. Did you always live on the streets?" The girl shook her head. "No, we had a tiny apartment, but when she got sick, she lost her job. Then she couldn't pay rent." Callie hugged her knees. "She tried really hard to get better, but she kept getting weaker." Evan felt a lump in his throat. What kind of illness did she have? "In her lungs. She coughed a lot." Callie looked at her hands. "Toward the end, she couldn't even get out of the bed we had in the shelter." "I'm so sorry, Callie. She told me to be strong," the girl continued. "Said I needed to keep going, even without her." Callie lifted her gaze. "But it's hard to be strong when you're scared all the time." "Scared of what?" Evan asked softly. "Everything." Callie shrugged. not having food, someone stealing what little I have, bad adults, falling asleep and never waking up like my mom. She paused. But the worst is the fear of being forgotten, like I never existed. Tears filled Evan's eyes. He reached out hesitantly, and when Callie didn't pull away, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're very brave," he said. "Braver than many adults I know." Callie gave a timid smile. "My mom used to say that too." "She was right," Evan confirmed. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "Callie, I wanted to ask you something about Sloane." The girl nodded, closing the photo album. "You said you dream about her, that you feel she's calling you." Evan chose his words carefully. "Do you still feel that?" "Yes," Callie replied without hesitation. "Every night when I close my eyes, it's like she's trying to show me something, but I can't quite see it clearly. What do you think it means, why you and her? Why are you so alike?" Callie thought for a moment. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think there's a reason for it. My mom always said things happen for a reason." They sat in silence, the sound of rain against the windows filling the room. Finally, Evan stood. "Let's make some hot chocolate," he suggested. "It's the perfect night for that." In the kitchen, while Evan prepared the drinks, Callie watched him curiously. He was unlike the other adults she'd met on the streets. He didn't look at her with pity or suspicion. He treated her like a real person, not a problem to be solved. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked suddenly. "Letting me stay here and everything?" Evan paused, considering his answer. "Because you showed up for a reason," he said finally, echoing the words he'd spoken in the cemetery. "And I want to find out what that is." Callie accepted this with a nod. When the hot chocolate was ready, they went back to the living room, sitting on the couch to watch a cartoon Evan found on TV. It was a simple, almost ordinary scene, a man and a child drinking hot chocolate on a rainy night. But for Callie, it meant something she hadn't had in months: security. And for Evan, it was a reminder that life went on, even in the midst of despair over his missing daughter. Days slipped into a routine. In the mornings, Evan worked in his home office, making calls, reviewing leads, while Callie roamed the house or drew pictures. In the afternoons, they often drove to the police command center, where Evan met with investigators and Callie waited patiently. Dana had become a regular presence, visiting almost daily. She treated Callie kindly, all the while maintaining her professional curiosity, keen to understand the mystery of the girl's resemblance and the unexplainable bond Callie seemed to share with Sloane. One particularly hot afternoon, on the way back from the police station, Evan made a detour. He parked in front of a brightly colored ice cream shop. "How about some ice cream?" he suggested. "It's the perfect day for it." Callie's eyes lit up. Ice cream was a luxury she'd rarely experienced while living on the streets, except when a kind stranger occasionally offered. Seated at an outdoor table, Callie savoring her strawberry cone, Evan with his chocolate. They made small talk easily. "What's your favorite color?" Evan asked. "Blue," Callie answered promptly, "like the sky on a nice day." Evan smiled. "You know Sloane loves blue too." Callie didn't look surprised. "Makes sense," she said simply, licking her ice cream. "What else do you like to do? I mean, if you can choose." The girl thought for a moment. "I like drawing and watching the stars. My mom taught me some constellations." Evan nodded, absorbing each new piece of information about Callie like puzzle pieces he couldn't yet fit together. "You must miss her," he said gently. Callie nodded. "Every day." But she hesitated, choosing her words. "It doesn't hurt as much now. I guess it's because I'm not alone anymore." A warm feeling spread through Evan's chest, the realization he was making a difference, however small, in the life of this extraordinary child who had appeared as if by magic. "You're not," he confirmed, "and you won't be again." That night, when Evan went to say goodnight to Callie, he found her already asleep, hugging an old teddy bear he'd taken from a box in the attic. She seemed so small and fragile in the big bed, her face peaceful despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought her there. Evan adjusted the blanket over her and, without thinking, placed a light kiss on her forehead. "Thank you for giving us hope," he whispered. In the hallway, He stopped in front of Sloane's closed bedroom door. A week ago, he couldn't even look at that door without feeling his heart ripped apart. Now there was a spark of hope. "We'll find you," he promised softly. "Wherever you are." In the guest room, Callie stirred in her sleep, a faint smile forming on her lips as she dreamed of a girl identical to her, smiling and waving from afar, waiting to be found. Night fell gently over the Mercer home. Outside, crickets began their nightly symphony, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, the silence was broken only by the ticking of the clock on the living room wall. Evan finished putting away the dinner dishes and stepped into the living room, where Callie had fallen asleep on the couch. The storybook they'd been reading together was still open on her chest, rising and falling with her quiet breaths. It had been a long day, another meeting with the detectives, more false leads, more disappointments in the search for Sloane. But now, watching Callie sleep, Evan felt a strange peace. Over the last few weeks, her presence had brought something back into the house that he couldn't define. Not happiness exactly. How could it be, with Sloane still missing? It was something more subtle, deeper, like the universe was reminding him that life goes on, that love is still possible even in the midst of pain. He settled silently into the armchair across from the couch, simply watching the girl. Her dark hair was spread over the cushion, the nearly invisible scar above her right eyebrow, the way her fingers curled slightly even in sleep. It was also familiar, so much like Sloane that it sometimes hurt to look. But it wasn't just that. There was something in Callie that was uniquely hers, a quiet strength, an older than her years wisdom born from her experiences on the streets. Something Sloane, raised in comfort and security, had never needed to develop. "You fill a void I didn't even know how to name," Evan whispered to the sleeping child. And it was true. In the 5 years since adopting Sloane with Laura, Evan had believed his family was complete, that nothing was missing, that his heart's space was entirely occupied. How could he have known there was another space quietly waiting for Callie? He rose carefully, gently removing the book from the girl's hands. He thought about carrying her to bed but decided not to risk waking her. Instead, he covered her with a light blanket. In the dim living room, Evan noticed again that disturbing resemblance. It wasn't only their physical traits, it was the way Callie furrowed her brow in her sleep, exactly like Sloane. The slight movement of her lips, as if she were talking to someone in her dreams. The question he'd been avoiding for weeks returned with full force. How is this possible? Two girls, the same age, identical, who had never met, until Callie started dreaming about Sloane at the exact moment she disappeared. Evan knew he had to face the truth that had been there all along, that he had suspected from the moment he saw Callie in the cemetery, a truth that would change everything. He went back to the kitchen and opened a drawer he kept locked. From it, he took a folder containing Sloane's adoption papers. He sat at the table and, for the 100th time since the case reopened, examined every page. Child, female, born on March 15th, surrendered for adoption by the birth mother who chose to remain anonymous. No information on the biological father. Nothing about a sister. Nothing about twins. Nothing beyond those few cold, bureaucratic lines. Evan thought of the social worker who handled the adoption, Mrs. Harmon. She had retired 2 years ago, but he still had her contact information. Maybe it was time to make a call. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11 p.m. Too late to call. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would start unearthing this truth nobody had told him. He returned to the living room and looked once more at Callie. Who would have guessed that in the midst of such suffering, he'd find this extraordinary child? A girl who was somehow, inexplicably, connected to his missing daughter. A girl who brought a renewed sense of purpose to his life when he needed it most. "Good night, little one," he whispered, adjusting the blanket one last time before heading upstairs to his own room. Morning arrived, sunlight streaming through the living room curtains. Callie woke slowly, rubbing her eyes and trying to remember why she was on the couch. She stood, carefully folding the blanket, a habit learned on the streets, where every possession had to be treated with care. "Good morning," Evan's voice came from the kitchen. "Did you sleep well?" Callie nodded, walking to the kitchen where the smell of pancakes filled the air. In recent days, she had begun to get used to this new routine. Regular meals, an adult asking how she'd slept, a place to call home, at least temporarily. "I made blueberry pancakes," Evan said, placing a plate in front of her. "They're your favorite fruit, right?" "Yes," Callie replied with a small smile. Another thing she was getting used to, being known, being remembered. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Evan clearly lost in thought. Callie watched him over her glass of juice, curious about what was on his mind. She'd learned to read people on the streets. It was a survival skill. Now she sensed Evan had something important to say. "Callie," he began at last, setting his fork aside, "we need to talk about something." The girl felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. In her experience, conversations that started this way were never good news. "Did I do something wrong?" No, Evan quickly reassured her. "It's not that. It's just that I've been thinking a lot about you and Sloane, about why you two are so alike." Callie nodded slowly, waiting for him to go on. "Last night, while you were sleeping, I realized something I think I've known since the moment I saw you in the cemetery." Evan took a deep breath. "Callie, I think you and Sloane are sisters. Twins, actually." The silence that followed felt weighted. Callie stared at Evan, her large green eyes unreadable. "How do you know?" she finally asked in a soft voice. "I'm not sure," Evan admitted, "but doesn't it make sense? The resemblance, the dreams, the connection you feel, and you're exactly the same age." Callie lowered her eyes to her plate, pushing around the crumbs with her fork. "I've thought about that too," she confessed, "ever since I saw her on TV." Evan leaned forward. "Callie, there's something I need to tell you. Something that might explain." He paused, gathering courage. "I adopted Sloane when she was a baby. Nobody ever told me she had a sister." Callie looked up, something dawning in her eyes. Not exactly surprise, but a kind of understanding, as though puzzle pieces were finally fitting. "My mom never said anything either," she whispered. Another silence, both absorbing the significance of that simple statement. "Your mom echt Rose, she never mentioned you having a sister, or having given a child up for adoption?" Evan asked gently. Callie shook her head. "No, but she kept this little box with a single baby shoe, just one. I always thought it was strange." Her eyes went wide with sudden realization. It was pink, exactly like my first baby shoe that she also kept. They were identical. Evan felt a shiver down his spine. "Where is that box now?" "I lost it when we had to leave the apartment," Callie said, voice tinged with sadness at the memory. "I couldn't bring everything." Evan nodded sympathetically. "Callie, I think we need to find out more about your mother's past and about Sloane's adoption. There might be a connection that nobody told us about." "Is that why I dream about her? Because we're sisters?" "I don't know," Evan answered honestly, "but I've heard stories about twins who sense things about each other, even when they're apart, especially in moments of danger or high emotion." Callie considered this, her brow furrowing in concentration. "It's like she's been calling me ever since she disappeared, like she knew I could help. I called the social worker who handled Sloane's adoption this morning," Evan revealed. "She's retired now, but she agreed to meet with me this afternoon. Would you like to come with me?" Callie nodded eagerly. "Yes. I'm also going to request a DNA test," Evan continued. "Not that I doubt it, but we need official proof for the paperwork." "Paperwork?" Callie asked, confused. Evan paused, realizing he was moving quickly. "Callie, if you really are Sloane's sister, well, that changes a lot of things." "I know," the girl said, surprising him with her insight. "It means we're family." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Family. Something Callie had lost when her mother died. Something Evan feared he'd lost when Sloane disappeared. "Yes," he confirmed softly. Family. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged with possibility, with questions still unanswered, truths yet to be discovered. "We should keep looking for Sloane," Callie finally said, placing her empty plate in the sink. "If she's my sister, I need to find her. More than ever." Evan felt a wave of admiration for this little child with such determination. "We will find her," he promised. "And when we do, you two will never be separated again." Callie smiled, a small but hopeful smile. "3," she corrected. "The three of us will never be separated again." In that moment, with the morning sun lighting up the kitchen and a long-hidden truth coming to the surface, something shifted between them. They were no longer two strangers brought together by the search for a missing girl. They were two parts of a broken family, starting to find their way back to wholeness. And somewhere, Sloane waited to complete the circle. Life in the Mercer house settled into its own rhythm. A new routine emerged naturally, like a river finding its path between rocks. Breakfast became a special time. Evan always made something different, and Callie sat at the kitchen table, feet swinging above the floor, watching him curiously. "Animal-shaped pancakes today," Evan announced one sunny morning, flipping the pan deftly. "This one is well, it was supposed to be an elephant." Callie tilted her head, trying to see the shape. "Looks more like a camel," she remarked, smiling slightly. "Then a camel it is," Evan agreed, sliding the pancake onto her plate. "Camels are my specialty." And so it went. Little jokes, shy smiles, fleeting moments of lightness that bubbled up like pockets of air in a deep lake of worry. The search for Sloane continued tirelessly, but in the breaks between detective meetings and following leads, they got to know each other. Every night before bed, Callie would draw. Evan bought her a large sketchbook and a box of colored pencils, essential items, he declared when she protested they were too expensive. At first, her drawings were simple: a house, a tree, the sun. But as days passed, people began to appear. "Who's this?" Evan asked, pointing to a figure in a red dress at the corner of the page. "My mom," Callie replied softly. Red was her favorite color. The next day, Evan brought a photo album into the living room. "I thought you'd like to see more pictures of Sloane," he said, sitting beside her on the couch. Together, they flipped through the album. Sloane as a baby, her first steps, blowing out candles on her 3rd birthday. Callie ran her fingertip over each picture, as if she could sense her sister through the paper. "She looks happy," she observed, studying a photo of Sloane grinning broadly, her face smeared with chocolate ice cream. "She is," Evan replied, deliberately using the present tense. "She's a very cheerful kid." One afternoon, while rain drummed on the windows, Callie seemed restless. She wandered the house, picking things up and putting them back, gazing outside, sighing. "Do you want to see her room?" Evan asked finally. Callie's eyes widened. "Can I?" "Sure," he said, standing. "Come on." Sloane's room was at the end of the 2nd-floor hallway. The door was shut. Evan hadn't gone inside since she disappeared. He hesitated for a moment, hand on the doorknob before pushing it open. The room was exactly as Sloane had left it. Soft yellow walls, a bed with a star-patterned quilt, shelves full of books and toys. A miniature dollhouse occupied one corner, and in another corner, an easel with colorful drawings. Callie stepped in slowly, as if treading on sacred ground. Her eyes scanned every detail, absorbing each piece of her twin's life. "She likes stars too," she said, touching the quilt on the bed. "Yes," Evan confirmed. "We used to look at constellations in the backyard on summer nights. She knows them all." Callie walked to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the colorful spines. She stopped at a large book with a fuzzy creature on the cover. "This is her favorite," she said, not as a question but as a certainty. Evan looked surprised. "How do you know?" Callie shrugged. "I just do." She pulled the book off the shelf and flipped through it. "My mom used to read me this story, about the monster who wasn't scary, he was just lonely." They sat together on Sloane's bed, and Evan read the book aloud, even though Callie already knew it. When he finished, she looked around the room again. "It's strange," she said softly. "It feels like I've been here before." "Maybe you have," Evan replied. "In your dreams." Dana Whitaker was now a frequent visitor to the house. She brought updates about the investigation, but also observed Callie with ever-growing interest. As an investigator, she was trained to notice details, and the details about Callie were fascinating. One sunny afternoon, while Callie played in the backyard, Dana and Evan talked on the porch. "Look at the way she walks," Dana remarked, pointing at Callie chasing a butterfly. "That tilt of her head to the right, the way her hands move when she's excited." Evan nodded. "I've noticed, and she furrows her brow in concentration exactly like Sloane." "They're not just physical traits," Dana went on. "They're mannerisms, habits, things usually learned, not inherited." They watched Callie crouch to examine a flower, touching it gently as if afraid of harming it. "The DNA test confirmed it, of course," Dana said. "They're identical twins. But even so what?" Evan asked. Dana shook her head, as though trying to articulate a difficult thought. "She reminds me so much of Sloane, like they share the same moments, as if even separated, they lived parallel lives." Callie discovered a ladybug and was now carefully walking toward the porch to show it off. Her face lit up with a smile that Evan knew so well from his other daughter. "Common sense," Dana continued, "not just in mannerisms, but in their preferences. You told me she likes the same foods, the same books, the same colors. It's as though they share a bond beyond genetics." "The dreams," Evan murmured. "Is she still dreaming about Sloane?" Dana nodded. "She told me yesterday she is. She said the dreams are clearer now. She can see trees, water, but still can't pinpoint where exactly." Callie arrived at the porch, holding out her hand with the ladybug. "Look, it has 7 spots." "That means good luck," Evan said, smiling at her. "I know," Callie answered, watching the small insect crawl across her palm. "My mom said ladybugs are messengers of good news." Dana and Evan exchanged glances. Yet another coincidence. Laura, Evan's wife, used to say the exact same thing to Sloane. Later, after Dana left, Evan and Callie sat at the kitchen table for dinner. It was part of their new routine. He cooked, she set the table, they ate together, talking about their day and slowly weaving an invisible web of trust and affection. "Dana thinks we're close to finding Sloane," Evan remarked, pouring more juice for Callie. The girl nodded, a serious look on her 5-year-old face. "I know, I feel she's waiting." "How do you feel about it?" "Having a sister." Callie thought for a moment, spinning her glass in her hands. "Happy, scared too. What if she doesn't like me?" Evan smiled gently. "She'll love you, like I already do." The words came naturally, without forethought. For a moment, Evan worried he'd gone too far too fast. But the smile that lit Callie's face dispelled his doubts. "I love you too," she answered simply. That night, while Callie slept in the guest room and the house lay quiet, Evan sat in the living room, looking at photographs spread out on the coffee table, pictures of Sloane, pictures of Callie he'd started taking in recent days. Side by side, they were almost indistinguishable. 2 little girls who should never have been separated. 2 halves of a whole that somehow, against all odds, were finding their way back to each other. "We'll find you, Sloane," he whispered to the darkness. "Your sister is showing us the way." Night was calm in the Mercer house. The full moon cast silvery light through the guest room curtains, where Callie slept soundly. Downstairs, Evan worked in his office, once again reviewing the case files, searching for any clue that might have been missed. The ticking clock and the rustle of turning pages were the only sounds. That was when a scream tore through the night. A high-pitched scream of terror, making Evan drop his pen and dash upstairs, skipping 2 steps at a time. His heart pounded as he reached Callie's door. "Callie!" he called, pushing the door open forcefully. The girl was sitting up in bed, eyes wide in the dark, hands gripping the sheets so tightly her knuckles were white. Her breaths came in short, desperate gasps, tears streaming down her pale face. Evan rushed to her side, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Callie, it's me." "It's okay. It was just a nightmare." But she shook her head violently. "No," she managed between sobs. "It's not just a nightmare. It's real. It's real." Evan turned on the bedside lamp, filling the room with a soft glow. Callie was trembling, her small body racked by fear. He pulled her into a protective hug, feeling her tense frame in his arms. "Breathe," he said gently. "I'm here. You're safe." Gradually, her breathing slowed. The tremors subsided, but she clung to Evan as if he were her only anchor. "Do you want to tell me what you dreamed?" he asked, once she'd calmed down a bit. Callie nodded, pulling away slightly to look into his eyes. Her face was still etched with the terror of the nightmare, but something stronger shone there, a near-adult resolve she sometimes displayed. "I saw her," she began, her voice still shaking. "Sloane, clearer than ever." Evan felt a chill down his spine. "What did you see?" Callie closed her eyes for a moment, as if summoning the images. A forest, very tall, dark trees. It was cold. She opened her eyes again. There was a dirt path. We followed it. We? Evan noticed the plural. Me and her. In the dream, I could walk beside her, but she couldn't see me. She was showing me the way. Callie swallowed. We reached a clearing. There was an old barn painted red, but the paint was peeling. The windows were broken. Evan listened intently, resisting the urge to interrupt. Every detail could matter. "We went inside," Callie continued, her voice steadier now that she was recounting it. "It was dark. It smelled like mold and animals. There was hay on the ground and tools hanging on the walls. We went to the back of the barn." She paused, trembling again. "There was a trap door in the floor." Sloane pointed to it. "When we lifted it, there were stairs leading down to a cellar." Evan's stomach clenched, but he kept his face calm. "And what was in the cellar?" Tears flowed again. "Her, the real Sloane, not the dream one. She was tied to a chair. There was tape over her mouth. She was dirty and scared." Another sob shook her small body. "It was her. I saw her down there, calling for me even though she couldn't speak." Evan wrapped his arms around her again, his own heart hammering wildly. "It's all right," he murmured, even though it wasn't. "You were very brave." "That's not all," Callie said, pulling back once more. "There was a small window in the cellar. Through it, I could see a blue water tower, and a sign on the road. It said..." She furrowed her brow. "Welcome to Green Valley, Green Ridge, Green River," Evan suggested, recalling a small town a few hours away. "Yes," Callie exclaimed. "Green River." That was it. And there was a number on the sign. I think it was 16 or 18. A cold wave washed over Evan. The dream was too vivid, too detailed to be just a child's imagination. What if it was real? What if Callie was truly seeing what Sloane was seeing through some inexplicable twin bond? "And one more thing," Callie added, her voice now barely above a whisper. "There was a man. I couldn't see his face, it was too dark, but he wore farmer's boots, and when he spoke, his voice was strange, like something was wrong with his throat." Evan reached for his phone, ready to call Dana, but paused. It was nearly 3 in the morning. As urgent as it was, it'd have to wait a few hours. "I'll make you some hot chocolate," he decided. "Then, if you want, you can sleep in my room tonight. How does that sound?" Callie nodded, clearly relieved she wouldn't be left alone. Evan scooped her into his arms. She was so light, so tiny, and carried her downstairs. While the milk warmed on the stove, Evan watched Callie sitting at the table, feet swinging above the floor. Her hands still trembled slightly, and her eyes had that distant look of someone who had witnessed something they shouldn't. "Do you think what I saw is real?" she asked suddenly. "That Sloane is really there?" Evan hesitated. He didn't want to lie, nor did he want to fuel false hope, or scare her even more. "I think your dreams matter," he answered carefully. "And I think you and Sloane have a special connection we can't explain. Tomorrow morning, I'll call Dana and tell her everything you told me." That seemed to satisfy Callie, who nodded solemnly, as if accepting a great responsibility. Later, after the hot chocolate and reading a few more chapters of Sloane's favorite book, Callie finally fell asleep in Evan's big bed. He stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about red barns, blue water towers, and a town called Green River. Dawn arrived gray and drizzly, as if the sky reflected the tense mood in the house. Evan had barely slept, dark circles under his eyes bearing witness to a night spent awake, watching Callie's uneasy sleep. As soon as the clock hit 7, he grabbed the phone and dialed Dinah. "I need to see you, now," he said the moment she answered. Callie had a dream. A different one. Dana arrived 40 minutes later, her hair still damp from the rain, a worried look on her face. Callie was still sleeping, exhausted after the nightmare. "Tell me everything," Dana demanded without preamble, sitting at the kitchen table, where Evan waited with a pot of strong coffee. Evan recounted the dream in detail. Forest, red barn, cellar, water tower, the sign for Green River, the man's strange voice. With each sentence, Dana's face grew more serious. "Green River," she murmured when he finished. "It's about 90 miles from here. Rural area, lots of old farms." "Do you think it could be real?" Evan asked, hope and fear wrestling in his chest. Dana sipped her coffee, lost in thought. "Normally I'd say it's just a dream, but—" She let the sentence hang. "But nothing about this is normal," Evan concluded. "Their resemblance. The dreams that started when Sloane disappeared. The way Callie just seems to know things about Sloane no one told her." "Exactly," Dana sighed. "Look, I don't believe in the supernatural. Never have. But I've seen enough strange cases to know there are things we can't fully explain." "So you'll investigate?" Evan pressed, leaning forward. "I'll do more than that," Dana answered, determination in her eyes. "I'll convince the police to expand the search to Green River." Dana kept her word. Using her influence as a former detective and a well-respected investigator, she arranged a meeting with Captain Reynolds, head of the Missing Persons Unit, that very morning. Evan left Callie with a trusted neighbor and accompanied Dana to the station. The meeting was tense, with Reynolds initially skeptical. "A dream," he repeated, looking from Dana to Evan as though they'd lost their minds. "You're asking me to mobilize resources based on a child's dream?" "A child who's the identical twin of the missing girl," Dana argued, "and one who's repeatedly shown an unexplainable connection to her sister. DNA tests confirmed they're twins, Captain," Evan added. "That can't be just a coincidence." Reynolds leaned back in his chair, weighing their words. "So what exactly do you want me to do? We have no jurisdiction in Green River." "Call the sheriff there," Dana suggested. "Explain the situation. Ask for a sweep of the rural areas, especially near any blue water tower. If they find nothing, at least we tried." The captain tapped his fingers on the desk. "The body we found—" "Wasn't Sloane," Evan interrupted. "It was another child, still unidentified. Which means there's a predator out there targeting young kids. Possibly the same one who took Sloane." That final argument hit home. Reynolds picked up the phone. "I'll make some calls," he decided. "No promises, but we'll check it out." The rest of the morning was a blur of phone calls, meetings, and tense negotiations. Meanwhile, at home, Callie drew what she'd seen in her dream: the red barn, the blue water tower, the dark cellar. Her remarkably detailed illustrations for a 5-year-old were handed over to the police for the search. By afternoon, there was confirmation. The sheriff of Green River, a man named Tom Hadley, verified the presence of a blue water tower on the outskirts of town. Yes, there were multiple abandoned farms in the area, some with red barns. "We're coordinating with Sheriff Hadley," Reynolds informed Evan and Dana, who waited anxiously in his office. "We'll deploy helicopters, K9 units, and search teams to that region." "When do they start?" Evan asked, unable to hide the urgency in his voice. "Tomorrow at first light," Reynolds answered. "I need a few hours to organize. Green River is a large rural area with many isolated properties. It'll require a coordinated effort." Dana nodded, satisfied with his response. "We'll need detailed maps of the region, and it'd help to talk to local people who know the area well, someone who can point us to old red barns." "Sheriff Hadley is already on it," Reynolds said. "He's gathering local residents who might help. Farm workers, mail carriers, anyone familiar with the remotest parts of the region." Evan felt a surge of hope so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. After weeks of fruitless searches, false leads, and disappointed hopes, they finally had something tangible, something that came directly from Callie and her connection to Sloane. "Thank you, Captain," he said, offering Reynolds his hand. "I know this isn't conventional, but don't mention it," Reynolds replied, shaking Evan's hand firmly. "I'm just doing my job. And if there's even the slightest chance we can find your daughter alive, We'll use all available resources." As they left the station, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and fresh. "Do you think we'll find her?" Evan asked quietly as they walked to the car. Dana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the golden evening light. "I've never given up on a case in my career," she said, "and I won't give up on this one. We'll find her, Evan. Callie showed us the way." When they arrived home, Evan found Callie in the living room drawing again. She looked up at him, a silent question in her gaze. "They're going to search," Evan confirmed, sitting beside her on the couch. "Tomorrow, helicopters, K9s, the whole works. They'll find that red barn." Callie nodded and returned to her drawing. This time, besides the barn, she drew a small girl sitting in a corner, hugging her knees. "She's waiting," Callie said without looking up. "She knows we're coming." That night, while Callie slept once more in her room, Evan sat on the porch, gazing at the stars that began to shine in the night sky. Somewhere, 90 miles away, Sloane might be looking at the same sky through a tiny cellar window, waiting, holding on to hope. "We're coming, sweetheart," he murmured into the darkness. "Hang on. We're coming." Meanwhile, in Green River, Sheriff Hadley hung up his phone after yet another call to a local resident, a farmhand who knew every inch of the area, each abandoned property, every hidden red barn in the woods surrounding the small town. "Meet me at the station tomorrow at 5 in the morning, the sheriff instructed. "We'll need your help." Dawn in Green River arrived cold and shrouded in a thick fog, clinging to the trees like ghosts. The sun was just a hint on the horizon when the search teams gathered at Sheriff Hadley's office. Local officers, police from Evans City, K9 specialists, and Evan himself, who hadn't slept a wink. Dana was by his side, clutching a mug of strong coffee, her eyes fixed on the map laid out on the central table. They'd marked all known red barns in the region, but the area was vast, with many abandoned properties and unlisted roads. "We have 10 teams ready to start," Sheriff Hadley explained, pointing at the map. "Each team will cover one sector. The helicopters can't do much in this fog, but as soon as it lifts, they'll join in." Evan studied the map, trying to match it with Callie's drawings. The blue water tower was marked, and around it, several red dots indicated possible barns matching the description. "That's a lot of them," he muttered, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "That's why I called in reinforcements," the sheriff replied, looking toward the door as a man walked in. He was tall and lean, about 50 years old, sun-worn skin and calloused hands. He wore faded jeans, a red flannel shirt under a battered jacket, and mud-stained boots. His face was serious, belonging to someone who knew this land and its secrets intimately. "This is Frank Tanner," the sheriff said. "He works as a caretaker for several local properties. He knows these woods better than any map." Frank nodded politely, not smiling. His blue eyes scanned the group, lingering on Evan. "You're the girl's father," he stated, not a question but a fact. Evan nodded. "Evan Mercer." "Thank you for helping." Frank shrugged, a gesture suggesting it was no big deal. No child should be lost in these woods, especially not now, with winter coming. The sheriff slid the map toward him. "Frank, we need your help to narrow our search area. We're looking for an abandoned red barn near the water tower." Frank leaned over the map, his fingers tracing the paper with the precision of someone who knows the place by heart, not just as lines. "There are 5 barns that fit that description," he said after a moment, "but only 3 are truly abandoned. The other 2 are still used for hay." He marked 3 points on the map with a pencil. They were all within about a mile of the water tower, but in different directions. "We'll start with these," the sheriff decided. "Frank, can you guide one of the teams?" The caretaker nodded but then hesitated, an odd look on his face. "There's something you all should know," he said finally. "Something that happened a few days back." Everyone in the room perked up, silence suddenly heavy with expectation. "I was out checking fences on the far north side of the Wilkins property," Frank began, pointing to a spot on the map. "Near this barn here." He indicated one of the 3 marked points. "It was almost dusk. I heard something." "What did you hear?" Dana asked, leaning in. Frank swallowed as though the memory bothered him. Screaming, a child, sounded like cries for help. It scared me. Evan's heart quickened. What did you do? I tried to follow the sound, Frank continued, but it got dark fast and that part of the woods is thick. I thought maybe it was just an animal, you know. Sometimes coyotes can sound, like children screaming. Dana and Evan exchanged a look, both suspecting that it was no coyote. Why didn't you report this earlier? The sheriff asked, his tone curious rather than accusatory. Frank sighed. Report what? A strange sound in the woods? Besides, no one mentioned a missing kid around here. I only found out about this search when you called me last night. The sheriff nodded, accepting the explanation. Well, this changes our priorities. We'll focus on that barn first. I'm going with you, Evan said immediately, addressing Frank. Me too, Dana added. The sheriff quickly organized the logistics. One team led by Frank Urs, including Evan, Dana, and 2 officers, would investigate the northern barn. The other teams would fan out to the other marked points, keeping in radio contact. 20 minutes later, they were on the move. The fog was beginning to lift, but the sky remained grey and threatening rain. Evan sat in the back of the sheriff's vehicle, Dana beside him. Frank rode shotgun, giving directions. It's faster if we take this road until here, he explained, pointing on the map. Then we walk about 500 yards through the woods. The road was rough, turning into a narrow dirt track as they headed deeper into the countryside. Tension in the car was palpable. Evan kept his eyes on the passing scenery, old trees, abandoned fields, an occasional solitary farmhouse or barn in the distance. This is the turn, Frank finally said, indicating a barely visible path among the trees. We go on foot from here. They exited the vehicle and equipped themselves with radios, flashlights, and weapons for the sheriff and the officers. Frank led the way, walking confidently, sure-footed on terrain he knew well. The forest was dense, tall trees blocking out much of the light and making the overcast day even darker. Keep your eyes open, the sheriff cautioned, and stay together. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of leaves underfoot and an occasional bird call. Evan's heart pounded, every step potentially bringing them closer to Sloane. After about 10 minutes, Frank raised a hand, signaling them to stop. There, he whispered, pointing. Ahead, partially hidden by the trees, stood a faded red barn. The paint was peeling in places, and one of the large doors hung crookedly on its hinges. It matched Callie's description exactly. We'll approach carefully, the sheriff whispered. We don't know if anyone's inside. They moved slowly, crouched low, making as little noise as possible. At the edge of a small clearing, the sheriff directed the officers to circle the perimeter. Frank, stay here with Mr. Mercer, he ordered. Dana, you and I will go in from the front. Officers Jensen and Ramirez cover the back. Dana nodded, drawing her weapon, a relic from her detective days. Evan wanted to protest, to say he had to be the one to go in first, to find his daughter, but he knew that would be reckless. If the kidnapper was still inside, it could be dangerous. Minutes that felt like hours passed, as Evan and Frank watched the officers take positions. Finally, the sheriff and Dana crept up to the barn's front entrance, while the other 2 disappeared around the structure. The sheriff counted silently to 3 with his fingers. Then he and Dana darted in, guns raised. Evan held his breath, waiting for shots or shouts. Instead, after a pause, he heard the sheriff's voice over the radio. Initial check clear. No sign of occupants. Come on in. Frank signaled to Evan, and they ran toward the barn. Inside, Evan was met with the smell of mold, old straw, and something else, a smell suggesting recent human presence. The barn's interior looked exactly like in Callie's dream. Rusty tools hung on the walls, hay scattered across the floor, dust swirling in beams of light from the gaps in the roof. But there were also clear signs that someone had been there recently. Check this out, one of the officers called, pointing to a corner. A pile of old blankets, an empty water bottle, some food scraps, and something that made Evan's blood run cold. A small pink hair tie, identical to the ones Sloane always wore. She was here, he whispered, picking up the hair tie with trembling fingers. There's more, Dana called from the other side of the barn. "Come take a look." They all gathered where Dana was crouched, examining the ground. There, partially hidden under old straw, was a trap door. "The cellar," Evan murmured, recalling Callie's words. The sheriff motioned for them to step back, and he and Dana positioned themselves on either side of the trapdoor, weapons at the ready again. With a swift movement, the sheriff grabbed the metal ring and pulled, revealing a dark opening and a wooden ladder leading down. "Sheriff's Department," he called. "Anyone down there?" Silence. Only the faint echo of his own voice. "I'm going in," Dana decided, putting one foot on the first rung. "Stay alert." "I'm going with you," Evan said firmly, making it clear he wouldn't take no for an answer. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but stay behind her. Frank, you and the other officers hold position here." Dana descended first, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. Evan followed closely, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. The ladder creaked under their weight. The air grew colder and damper as they descended. At the bottom, Dana swept the flashlight in a circle, illuminating the space. It was a small cellar, concrete walls and a dirt floor. A single narrow window near the ceiling let in a sliver of dull light. And there, in a corner among rags and an old blanket, lay a small, unmoving shape. Evan felt the world come to a halt. Dana moved cautiously forward, gun still raised, while he remained frozen on the last step. "There's someone here," Dana shouted, voice tight. Then, more softly, "Sloan?" "Sloan Mercer." The figure stirred slightly. A faint moan escaped. Dana lowered her weapon and hurried to the bundle, Evan right behind her. The flashlight revealed what his heart already knew. It was Sloan, his daughter, alive. Her face was filthy and gaunt, her dark hair tangled. She wore the same clothes from when she vanished, now dirty and torn. Her eyes were half closed, as if the light hurt after days in darkness. "Sloan," Evan whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. "Oh my God, Sloan." "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a breath, almost inaudible. "Yes, it's me," Evan managed, tears now streaming freely down his face. "It's me, my love." Gently, he lifted her into his arms. She was so light, so frail. He could feel her ribs through the thin fabric of her shirt. "Daddy found you," he said, cradling her as he had when she was a baby. "It's all right now. You're safe." Sloan cried softly, a sound that broke Evan's heart, yet filled it with indescribable gratitude. She was alive, hurt, weak, dehydrated, but alive. "We need to get her out of here," Dana said, already speaking into her radio. "We have the girl alive. Need paramedics ASAP." Evan stood, Sloan in his arms. She seemed so small, so vulnerable. Her eyes closed, and for a terrifying moment, he thought. But no, she was still breathing. She'd only passed out, exhausted after the ordeal of her captivity. "Hold on, sweetheart," he whispered, carefully moving toward the ladder. "We're going home, and Callie is waiting to meet you." Dana climbed up first, making way. As they emerged from the cellar, the officers and Frank were ready, their faces showing a mixture of shock and relief. "Good God," Frank murmured, staring at the little girl in Evan's arms. "She was here all along." "Paramedics are on the way," the sheriff said. "A helicopter, too. They'll take her straight to Oakville's hospital." Evan just nodded, beyond words. All the tension, all the pain, all the fear of the last few weeks had led to this moment. His daughter in his arms, frail but alive. A chance to start over, to heal, to reunite the family that should never have been torn apart. While waiting for the paramedics, Evan sat on an old bale of hay, holding Sloan tight. Dana came over, placing a blanket around the girl. "You did it," she said softly to Evan. "Or rather, you both did. You and Callie." Evan looked at his daughter's sleeping face, so much like Callie's, twins separated by fate, reunited by a bond that defied explanation. "We need to tell Callie," he murmured. "I'm already calling the neighbor who's with her," Dana assured him. "She's going to be so happy." Outside, sirens echoed through the woods. Help had arrived. Soon, Sloane would be in a hospital, receiving the care she needed. And then she would finally meet her twin sister, the girl who refused to believe she was dead, the one whose dreams had led them to this moment. Frank stood by the barn door, watching father and daughter with a pensive expression. "Shall no," he said slowly. "I've seen a lot of strange things in these woods over 30 years, but never anything like this." Overhead, the thump of helicopter blades now filled the air, circling the clearing in search of a landing spot. "It's a miracle," said the caretaker. "No other word for it." Evan looked up, meeting the man's eyes. "It's not a miracle," he corrected gently. "It's love, the kind of love that keeps people connected, even when they're apart." As the paramedics finally arrived, rushing through the forest path with their bags and equipment, Evan gently kissed Sloane's forehead. "We're going home, sweetheart," he whispered. "Your sister is waiting." Oakville Children's Hospital was a modern building with a colorful facade, decorated with animal paintings and child-friendly furniture to make the experience less frightening. On that sunny morning, Evan walked down its white corridors, firmly holding Callie's hand. She was quiet, her steps hesitant, her eyes fixed straight ahead. 3 days had passed since Sloane's rescue. 3 days of medical tests, police interviews, and reporters camped outside the hospital. 3 days in which Sloane had been conscious only briefly, too weak for long visits. But this morning, the doctors finally allowed the sisters to meet. Sloane was physically on the mend, mild dehydration, some bruises and scratches, but nothing that couldn't heal. The emotional scars would take longer, certainly, but this first step in her recovery was about to happen. "Are you nervous?" Evan asked gently, noticing how Callie bit her lower lip, a gesture he now knew Sloane did as well when she was anxious. Callie nodded, her eyes still downcast. "What if she doesn't like me?" Evan stopped, kneeling so he was at her eye level. "She already likes you," he said softly. "She saw you in her dreams, just like you saw her. You two met before you ever met in person." That brought a small smile to Callie's lips. "Right." They continued down the hall until they reached room 204. Dana waited outside, speaking quietly with a doctor. She smiled and waved when she saw them. "Good morning, Callie," she greeted. "There's someone very excited to meet you." The doctor, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, bent slightly. "Hello, Callie. I'm Dr. Martin, taking care of your sister." "Is she better?" Callie whispered. "Much better, doctor," Martin assured her. "She asked about you the moment she woke up." Callie's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," the doctor confirmed. "She said she dreamed of you again." Evan felt Callie's small hand tighten around his. The bond between the twins continued to amaze him. Even after the rescue, even with the danger behind them, it was still intense. "You can go in now, Doctor," Martin continued. "Just remember, she's still recovering, so no rough play. If she gets tired, you'll have to leave so she can rest." Evan nodded, grateful for the doctor's concern. "We understand." Dana put a hand on Callie's shoulder. "Want me to go with you?" Callie glanced at Evan, then back at Dana and shook her head. "No, thank you. I want to go with Evan." Dana smiled sympathetically. "Of course, I'll be right outside if you need me." Evan took a deep breath and knocked softly on the door. A nurse opened, smiling when she saw them. "We've been expecting you," she whispered, holding the door wider. "She's eager." The room was bright, walls painted a soft pastel color, a large window letting in the morning sunlight. Children's drawings hung on the walls, flowers in a vase, and some stuffed animals, attempts to make the hospital environment feel less clinical. And in the bed, propped up against white pillows, was Sloane. Evan felt Callie freeze beside him at the sight of her sister for the first time, not in dreams, not in pictures, but in real life. The resemblance was so profound it felt impossible, like looking into a mirror that reflected not just physical traits, but something more profound. Sloane also went very still. Her large green eyes, identical to Callie's, locked on the girl in the doorway. A bandage covered her arm where the IV drip was inserted, her face still showing signs of fatigue, but her cheeks had more color, and there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there when Evan found her. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the gentle beep of the monitors and the sisters' breathing, which seemed synchronized even in this first meeting. "Hi," Callie finally said, her voice soft but steady. A slow smile spread across Sloane's face. "Hi," she replied, her voice still a bit hoarse from lack of use. Evan gently nudged Callie forward. The nurse slipped out, closing the door quietly to give them privacy. Standing by the bed, Callie looked at Evan as if asking for permission. He nodded, releasing her hand. Callie stepped closer, now within Sloane's reach. "I saw you," Sloane said quietly, tentatively extending her hand. "In my dreams?" Callie smiled, a radiant smile so pure that Evan felt tears in his eyes. "Me too," she said, taking her sister's outstretched hand. The moment their hands touched, something in the room seemed to shift. A gentle energy, almost imperceptible, pulsed between them. Their faces showed surprise, then a deep recognition. "You saved me," Sloane whispered, squeezing Callie's hand. "I just showed the way," Callie replied. "Dad found you." The word "Dad" slipped out naturally, effortlessly, as if Callie had said it 1,000 times before. Evan's heart felt like it might burst, overflowing with love. He came closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Callie led me to you, Sloane," he said gently. "Without her, we'd never have found the barn." Sloane looked at her sister with admiration. "Weren't you scared?" "I was," Callie admitted, "but I was more worried about you." Another silence, not awkward but filled with emotion and connection. Slowly, Sloane shifted to one side of the bed, making room. It was a silent invitation, and Callie understood immediately. Careful not to tug any tubes or wires, Callie climbed onto the bed, sitting beside her sister. For a moment, they just looked at each other, as though memorizing every feature. Then, as if moved by the same impulse, they hugged. Evan watched, tears now freely flowing down his cheeks, as his daughters embraced for the very first time. Their small arms wrapped around each other with a naturalness that defied the fact they had been separated at birth. There was no hesitation, no strangeness, only the recognition that something that had been incomplete was now whole. "I knew I wasn't alone," Sloane murmured against Callie's shoulder. "Even when I was scared, I felt someone was with me." "You'll never be alone again," Callie promised. "Never again." Evan moved closer, enveloping them both in his arms. His daughters together at last. A family he never knew he could have, now complete. "You two are a miracle," he whispered, kissing their identical dark heads. "My miracle." The girls pulled back slightly, just enough to look at each other again. They had so much to say, so many stories of separate lives now merging into one. But for now, this moment was enough. Two halves of a whole, reunited at last. Golden morning light poured through the hospital window, bathing the twins. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Whole at last, as they were always meant to be. While the twins recovered in the hospital, Dana Whitaker continued her investigation. The case wouldn't end with Sloane's rescue. Someone was responsible. Someone had meticulously planned the kidnapping, planted a false body, and kept a 5-year-old captive for weeks. The abandoned barn was the first clue. In the county records office, Dana pored over dusty yellow documents, tracing the owner of that forgotten piece of land. The property had changed hands many times over the decades. It originally belonged to the Harkins family, then to a lumber company, and finally, about 5 years ago, to a company called Bright Vale Holdings. Bright Vale Holdings, Dana muttered, writing it down. Back at the station, she discovered the company was nothing but a shell, with no physical office or known employees. Just a mailing address and one name listed as director, Marcus Turner. That was when her phone rang, a contact from the financial department. Dana, Bright Vale Holdings is a subsidiary of another corporation called Briggs Enterprises. The name Briggs rang a bell. Nathaniel Briggs. It had come up early in the investigation into Evan's background, then dismissed as irrelevant. An old business partner. Within an hour, the picture was clearer. 7 years ago, Nathaniel Briggs and Evan Mercer had been partners in a tech firm. The partnership ended when Evan discovered Briggs was embezzling funds. Evan had reported him, and Briggs lost everything: money, reputation, career. And Marcus Turner, he was Briggs's cousin with a history of petty crimes. He had motive, he had means, and now we know he has a connection to the place, Dana concluded. I need a warrant for Nathaniel Briggs's residence. Nathaniel Briggs's mansion was in an exclusive gated community outside the city. Dana led the team approaching his front door, the warrant in her pocket like a promise of justice. Briggs was tall and thin, grey-haired, his eyes cold. He wore an impeccable grey suit as though expecting visitors. Mr. Briggs, we have a warrant to search your property in connection with Sloane Mercer's kidnapping, Dana announced, showing her badge. There must be a mistake, Briggs said smoothly. I know nothing about this. The search was thorough. In his office, hidden in a safe behind a painting, they found a folder containing surveillance photos of the Mercer home, details of Sloane's routine, and receipts of payment to Marcus Turner. Even more, notes on an unidentified girl, same age and appearance as Sloane, living in a shelter. The girl whose body had been planted to be found and mistaken for Sloane. When Dana returned with the evidence, Briggs's composure finally cracked. Mr. Briggs, you're under arrest for the kidnapping of Sloane Mercer and the death of Jane Doe. As the officers handcuffed him, Briggs smiled, a hollow smile, devoid of humor or happiness. He left me with nothing, he said calmly. So I took what he loved most. You kidnapped an innocent child for revenge, Dana said, disgust seeping into her voice. Business is business, Briggs replied. He destroyed my life. I wanted him to feel the same. During interrogation, the full picture emerged. Briggs had hired Marcus Turner to carry out the kidnapping. Another accomplice, an employee at a morgue, supplied the body of a child who had died of natural causes to pass off as Sloane. The plan was to keep Sloane alive for a few weeks, prolonging Evan's agony. And then, Dana shuddered at what might have happened if they hadn't found Sloane in time. 2 days later, Evan went to the police station. He needed to see cut with his own eyes the man who nearly destroyed his family. Nathaniel Briggs sat in the interrogation room, still wearing his expensive suit, now rumpled after days in a cell. When Evan entered, their eyes met. Did you really think this would fix anything? Evan asked, his voice low but steady. Briggs didn't answer, merely returned his stare. You tried to break me, Evan continued. But in the end, you're the one who's lost. Briggs finally spoke. You left me with nothing. You made your choices, Evan replied, and now you've made another, one that will cost you the rest of your life. Evan turned to leave but stopped at the door. You know what's ironic? If you hadn't done this, I would never have found Callie. I'd never have known Sloane had a twin sister. In a way, you made my family more complete. Briggs's mask slipped at last, revealing the emptiness of his vengeance, pointless, destructive only to himself. Evan walked out without a backward glance. Outside, the sun was shining. He had 2 daughters waiting at the hospital, and a new life to build with them. At the subsequent trial, Briggs was found guilty on all counts. The judge, appalled by the calculated cruelty of the crime, imposed the maximum sentence, life in prison without parole. Marcus Turner and the other accomplices also received lengthy sentences. When the judge's gavel fell, making the sentence official, Evan felt no joy or satisfaction, only relief. A dark chapter was closing at last. Dana found him outside the courtroom. It's over, she said simply. Evan nodded. Not completely. The girls still have a long road ahead. We all do. You'll make it, Dana assured him. You've already overcome the worst. Evan thought of his 2 daughters, the weeks of healing ahead, the challenges yet to come, but he also thought of their identical smiles, their shared laughter, and the joyful moments now filling his home. Yes, he agreed, the worst is behind us. Summer arrived in Oakville with bright blue skies and heat that made the asphalt shimmer. But in the Mercer's backyard, the generous shade of old trees made the warmth comfortable, even pleasant. It was a Saturday morning, and the yard was filled with children's voices. On the neatly trimmed lawn, 2 identical girls ran barefoot, their dark hair woven into matching braids that bounced with every move. They wore colorful shorts and t-shirts, their knees showing little scrapes, signs of adventures and rough-and-tumble play. Sloane held a stick that, in their world of imagination, became a magic wand. Callie brandished an old umbrella imbued with special powers. She could fly like Mary Poppins or use it as a shield against invisible monsters. "Watch out," Sloane shouted, pointing at a nearby tree. "The giant is coming." Callie quickly popped open the umbrella, using it as a shield. "Hurry, use your magic." From the porch, comfortably seated with a glass of iced lemonade, Evan Mercer watched his daughters with a serene smile. On the table beside him lay a red folder stamped with the family court seal, the final adoption papers for Callie, now officially Callie Mercer, signed that very morning after months of legal proceedings. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. After rescuing Sloane and arresting Nathaniel Briggs, there had been the long healing process, physical, but more importantly, emotional. The first weeks were the hardest. Sloane had frequent nightmares, waking up screaming in the night. Callie still struggled with the fear of abandonment, the loss of her mother, the adjustment to a stable life after so long on the streets. There were therapy sessions, tears, setbacks, but there was also progress, small daily victories that Evan celebrated quietly. The first night both girls slept without nightmares. The first breakfast they laughed together as though they'd been sisters their whole lives. The first day Sloane could talk about her captivity without shaking. The first time Callie referred to the house as our house, not your house. Laura, Evan's ex-wife, visited a few times. The trauma of the fake funeral made it impossible for her to fully return. She now lived in another city, rebuilding her life step by step. But she kept regular contact with Sloane and, surprisingly, developed a special fondness for Callie. Enrolling Callie in school had been another challenge. Years on the streets left gaps in her education. But her determination was remarkable. With tutors and the unwavering support of Evan and Sloane, she caught up quickly. "Daddy, look!" Sloane called, snapping Evan from his thoughts. "We built a fairy house." He put down his lemonade and walked to where the girls were crouched, examining a tiny structure made of sticks, leaves, flowers, and colorful pebbles. "It's the Fairy Queen's house," Callie explained solemnly. "She needs a safe place to live." Evan knelt beside them, admiring the care they'd put into building the miniature structure. "It's perfect," he praised them. "I'm sure the Fairy Queen will love it." "Tonight we'll leave some honey here," Sloane added. "Callie said fairies like honey." "My mom told me so," Callie chimed in, without the sadness that used to accompany mentions of her mother. Now there was only sweet remembrance. "Your mom was right," Evan agreed, gently touching Callie's shoulder. "Rose knew a lot of interesting things, didn't she?" Callie nodded, smiling. One of the little rituals they had created was honoring Rose's memory, keeping her alive through stories and memories. In the living room, a photo of her now held a place of honor alongside the family pictures. After a quick snack in the shade of a large fig tree, the girls went back to their games, this time inventing a complex story about pirates seeking hidden treasure. Evan returned to his seat on the porch, observing them from his favorite spot. The midday sun cast a golden glow over the yard, contrasting perfectly with the vibrant green of the grass and trees. The girls' laughter filled the air like music, a moment of perfection Evan knew he would cherish forever. Dana had been right when she said months ago that it was like they shared the same time. There was a synchronicity between Sloane and Callie that surpassed physical resemblance, the way they finished each other's sentences, how they seemed to communicate without words, how they instinctively knew what the other was feeling. Watching them run across the yard, identical faces alight with smiles, Evan felt a gratitude so profound it almost hurt. "I thought I lost one daughter," he murmured to himself, eyes brimming with tears. "And now, I have two." His gaze lingered on Callie, the improbable child who appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. "Thank you, Callie. You led me to her." In the yard, the girls were now dancing in circles, holding hands and singing a made-up song about fairies and pirates and magical treasures. Their laughter blended into one sound, just as their shadows merged on the grass beneath the sun. Two halves of a whole at last reunited. A family broken and rebuilt, stronger for having once been shattered. If this story touched your heart, Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.